setting stands for program. And in program mode, only your aperture and your shutter speed are going to be set by the camera. White balance, you now have control over. ISO, you now have control over. Are there other things? Possibly so. But those are the two really big ones. The A setting stands for aperture priority. What that is now your aperture ring comes into play. I want to take these pictures at 2.8. It's going to determine my shutter speed. I don't even have to think about it. All I have to say is, I want to give it all the light I can. I'm going to set it to 1.4. Or, here's the other, this is like an aside. This is the other part of aperture. Aperture is not only how big that opening is, but how big that opening is determines what's called depth of field. You've seen pictures where the foreground is perfectly in focus and the background is a complete mushy blur. That's kind of cool because it separates the subject from the background. That's accomplished by getting a great big open aperture and getting the subject a little bit away from the background. And there's a few other little goodies that go into it, but so there's
more light.
It's more light. But what if I really want not only you to be in focus, but I've got 3 rows of people. You're sitting in the front row, and I've got the pretty girls in the next row. I've got you and a couple of other people sitting in the front, and then I've got the boys in a 3rd row. Now I've got face and face and face, but I've got a narrow little depth of field, just enough probably to get your face. Now that whole other 2 rows is out of focus. So light or not, I've got to move up to probably 4 or 5.6 at the very least in order to get everybody in focus, from the guy in the back row to the girl in the front row. Or I'm taking a picture of a car. Sometimes it's cool to have that headlight in focus and then the car gets more and more out of focus as you go down the side. Sometimes you want to take that picture and you want to see the tail fin from the point of view of the headlight. Okay, now I got to have a much smaller aperture. I'm going to have to get my light some other way. Slower shutter, higher ISO. Starting to see how these are, they're like all, and as you change one, the other one's going to have to change if you're going to keep your exposure good. So now you also see why IA is so cool. Because for those times, it is easy. It also takes away some of your artistic freedom. I could never shoot IA at a sporting event. I would never be able to stop the action. I've got to have more control. So the other thing we can do is, other than setting it in A mode, we can set it in S mode. S is shutter priority. So now I'm saying I want a really fast shutter. So I'm using this dial up here and I'm cranking my shutter. My shutter will go...
Oh, okay.
Right. My shutter will go all the way to 4,000th of a second. But even at f1.4, that's going to give me a really black picture because there's not enough light. Now, my ISO is at 160. So if I really had to have a 4,000th, let's do a better example. Let's go to a 2,000th of a second. Come on. Come on. Roll for mama. Just didn't want to move. There we go. Okay. So now I've got a 2,000th of a second. I've got f1.4. When I aim at the light even, the couch is completely black. That corner of the room, black. The light is okay and the window's okay.
And that's with what?
Okay, I'm set at 1.4 for my aperture and 2,000th of a second. But my ISO is only at 160. Okay, so let's do this. I accidentally have some exposure compound. We'll get that gone. So we look here and we'll say, well, but I really still want to see a little bit. Like, I want to see the sofa a little bit for whatever reason. Okay, and it's a black sofa. So I'm going to take my ISO and I'm going to go, well, I'm going to try, I'm skipping right up to 800 because I'm pretty sure that anything less than that I'm not going to get enough light. Oh, look, I can even see that light fixture, that black light that's sitting on the black couch. I can see it now. That's how much more light I'm cranking in. But now I've added some granularity because that's what ISO does. I've added, so I'm going to take the picture because in the black you'll be able to see what I mean by that because you probably Have you ever seen graininess? Alright, so I'm in playback mode, and let's watch.
Flashing?
Okay, the flashing is what's blown out. So I've blown this out. There is no data there. It's whiter than white. See a little bit of dotty graininess in there? And see how as you go up toward the light, it kind of stands out and then it goes away when you're actually in the light? That's the film grain. Let's take another shot.
That's not too bad though.
That one, 800 is not too bad. I'm going to really exaggerate it. I'm going to go for 1600, same shot. And let's see how high this baby will go. I'm going to go 3200, same shot. That's another doubler. And 6400, that ought to kill us because I don't even like 6400 on that camera. Alright, so then we'll go into playback mode. Okay, now you can really see it.
Oh yeah.
Unacceptable. Now, there is software that'll fix that. And so for those moments when you really need that high of an ISO just to get the shot, you know, you can't complain. It's all there. It's just, you know, and when you look at it really small, you don't see it. But if you were going to blow that up and off, when you print it, even at a 5x7, you would see some of that graininess. Again, now, and also notice, now you can't see anything outside the windows, where before we could see trees. I've let so much light in that we're actually not only losing the light, which I would expect to lose, but we're losing these bright areas as well. But we picked up all kinds of detail here, and in the corner of the room you couldn't even see before.
Right.
And I didn't change anything else, it just changed the ISO. So now you got this triangle going in your head, I hope.
I think so.
Aperture size, shutter speed, ISO. Which one has to go where to get what I intend to get? That's what exposure's all about. So in shutter priority, you're going to set the speed you need. So if you're taking a picture of that hyperactive little nephew, okay, you're probably going to go with a 500th of a second. What I would do, I would probably put it in shutter priority at a 500th of a second. If I couldn't take a picture, and let me show you what that looks like, because that's kind of important. That's not what I want. I want out of this altogether. I want out of the whole mode. Alright, so let's go back to having an ISO that's something we can live with. I mean, we'll stay high. We'll stay at 800. Let's put our shutter now at, you could try a 500th, okay? Oh, and it likes that, so I gotta go faster. I want to get to the threshold where it kind of yells at us. There. Look what happens when I press the shutter button. See how these went red?
Yeah.
That means, well, you can take it, but it's going to be a crappy picture. It's going to be too dark. It doesn't like it. I'm not even offended by that, but the camera was like, no, that's too dark. Probably because we lost a lot of detail in here. Yeah, and it's trying to get us a really good picture. That's its. Cameras are smart. So when it gives you and where my focus is set, it's set on the darkest spot down that hall. So that's also why and that's the place where the picture wasn't so good. Everything else was pretty much okay light-wise. So let's say I decided the child's really hyperactive today and I've got to have that 200th of a second. Look how dark my picture's going to be. That's pretty unacceptable. And it's telling me right there. So that's the moment when here's another way to do this example. Let me put my aperture up at 8. Let's go back to my 400, 500th. It doesn't like it, but all that's too dark is that. Let me see if I needed 1,000, 1,300th. That's a pretty dark picture. Okay? Oh, because I'm in shutter priority, it's setting my aperture and it's saying, look, I've got you at 1.4. I don't have any bigger to go.
This is what it is.
This is what it is. Your only option, if you've got to have that shutter speed, is start cranking your ISO. And this is where that test you're going to do, you know, at tomorrow or the next day, where you're going to pile up some really cool, maybe some of those cat toys, because they're probably brightly colored, you know, and texture, probably have feathers and little things that stick out, and Great, and then when they sit together, they're going to make shadowy dark places where you can look for noise. You know, and so you're gonna go to ISO 1600. It still doesn't even like that. It wants even more. It is better. Yeah. It is a brighter picture. Now, if I aim up here where it's lighter, the white says, "Oh, we are way happy." You know, so it's also what in the scene. Like if I'm taking a picture of your face and it's red, I'm not going to be happy because that's okay. If your face is all dark in the picture, right, what's the point? So there's kind of your trifecta, and there's how the dial plays into it. Everything automated, shutter and aperture automated, well, you pick the aperture, it automates the shutter. You pick the shutter, it automates the aperture, and then you get to M. Now you do everything. You're in charge of white balance and ISO and shutter and aperture. And that is truly awesome when you can set something up. If you're taking a picture of a still life or an eBay product and you want it to be just right, manual's fantastic because you can putz. You can sit there and you can say, well, I want a shallow depth of field because I don't care if the wall is in focus. I just want that little figurine that I'm selling, just that in focus. So you can make a really shallow depth of field by, you know, cranking that all the way down. Then you can make your shutter speed match. You can take your ISO way low and you put it on a tripod, make your shutter speed a 30th of a second if that's all the light you have. Woo! But when you're back to that dog or that cat or that pretty active little nephew dude, that's not going to fly. Shallow depth of field may fly because all you may care about is his face or his little body. I mean, that's all on the same plane pretty much. But now you got to have some shutter speed. So manual, you would, by the time you get set up, he'd be 4 blocks down the road and you're running after him. Come back! It's not working for me! You know, so I would never even consider shooting sports in manual mode. Just because I have more control, it's not feasible. I can't pull it off. Right. So going back to a wedding, you're taking a picture of the wedding cake and you have a half hour to kill because you got there way early. Set up the tripod, throw her in manual mode, and get pictures of the flowers on that cake. Why not? But if you're getting there, as the bride and groom are getting there, and there's their whole entourage right behind them, and you've got to get that cake picture right now, no. You're going to go into a mode that you know you can quickly control, get it right, and get done. It might be IA at that moment, or it might be aperture mode, because I really only want the corner of the cake in focus, and as we go back toward, it's a huge cake, toward the corners, I want it to fall out of focus, because that'd be a cool picture. Put in aperture mode, great big aperture, it'll figure out the shutter that'll get me enough light, and if it doesn't and it turns red down here, I'll just crank my ISO, and I'm done. Shot taken, and on to the next thing. I am a big automated user. I'm not a big manual focuser either. I am way more autofocus or the macro focus. And